everybody, and welcome to this evening's session on video editing, adding movement. My name is Tom Strnad. I'm going to be taking you through this evening's journey and exploration. Yeah, I just want to welcome everyone. We will be using what's essentially free software called Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. I'm going to take us through the process of those steps and how that works, look at some examples, and yeah, it'll be some really fun tips and tricks on how to deal with still images and bring them into the video world and deal with them. So definitely want to introduce myself. So my name is Tom Strnad. I'm the lead digital artist of the Creatorspace Mobile Digital Arts Lab project. Definitely want to thank all of our sponsors and partners, I should say, in this project. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts, and we also have our library sponsors, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, and the Wasaga Beach Public Library. So I want to also remind everyone that most of the equipment and the concepts we're looking at, this is software today. For example, it's free, so you can load it on your own computer. If you're looking to access computers and you're a member of the Blue Mountains Public Library, there are two iMac computer stations there that have Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve, the full studio version available that you can book out and get sessions. So you can go through our website, tbmcs.ca, and you'll see a link to access that. Also equipment you can take out from the Blue Mountains Public Library, and coming soon in November, the Wasaga Beach Public Library, and then in spring 2021, the Collingwood Public Library. So lots of access. We want to make sure that beyond just the webinar that you can access some of this equipment as well. So yeah, let's carry forward here. So in terms of what we're going to look at today, we will have an overview of the software, just quickly look at it. I want to recommend if you go to our tbmcs.ca website, you can check out our YouTube channel, and that has a ton of resources on video editing, specifically the software, how to install it, how to get into all the editing, starting a project, and all that. So we're not going to cover all of that, but you can go back to access all of those resources as well. I want to remind everyone that once you register for this through Crowdcast, you can replay this. So once we're done, you can go back through this. So don't be worried if you miss something or you want to go over some of the terms again or some of the ideas of how it works. You can always review this and work along with it and use some of your own photos and try it out. So that's kind of the whole idea. So we're going to do an overview, just talk about the software, bringing photos to life, the art of movement for still images. We're going to look at importing photos for editing, and then the effects and keyframes and how those work, and adding movement to photos and graphics. So by exploring what this concept is, then we'll basically do a hands-on to showcase how it can be done, and at the end we'll have some time for a Q&A. So you can ask questions throughout. I'll get to all of them at the end, and we can answer, hopefully get to everybody's questions or comments or just thoughts. Really want to have as much interaction as possible. So the art of bringing photos to life is somewhat, quite an interesting idea. But let's start just with the software overview. So what we're using today is Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. So this is totally free. You can get it from the blackmagicdesign.com website. It's a free nonlinear editing software. So that basically all computer editing software is nonlinear, meaning that you're free to move and edit things around in any order. You're not stuck to have to watch through 60 minutes of footage. You can go from the beginning to the end and so on. So it's nonlinear. It's available for Mac, Windows, and Linux as well. So if you want to use any of those OS systems. The great thing too is it's used by most Hollywood films for color grading. So it has that kind of behind it. One of the best color grading softwares out there. And now it's being used more towards overall nonlinear editing software. And again, it is free. So that's why we want to demo with this, because it's not something that you have to spend hundreds of dollars on annually or monthly or even thousands of dollars on. You can start just with the free version that we'll look at today. So that's the overview of the software. So moving on, so bringing photos to life, adding movement. So in terms of what this means, if you think about the idea that still images are just that, they're still. So a photo doesn't move. It might capture movement. There's concepts in that, but we're looking at how do we add movement to what typically video has movement, because there's moving frames, moving people. Now it could be very still like a video clip, but we want to think about what happens when there's just a photo taken and we want to add some movement into it. And so we can use effects in our digital video software. We can add movement to the photos. So this could be things like zooms, pans, rotations, and more. And it could include color grading and post-processing as well. So we could potentially colorize, we can change the color, we can make photos black and white, and this could all be worked on in the video world of this software. And in the past, this process was really difficult, required things like optical printing, large moving machines, and now you can just really do a few clicks and on a keyboard and mouse, and it could be that easy. So it's a pretty cool ability of what we can do digitally now that we might have had to have done in some sort of analog process before. So you can imagine zooms into photos potentially would have been done on a moving machine, like vertically moving towards it with a camera to try to maximize quality of the image instead of like a camera zoom, but having that kind of plane, the field movement of going into it. So the ability of what we can do is quite amazing. So again, let's think about what we want to do with stills and how we can move them. So this can apply to graphics. It can apply to things you might create in like Photoshop or photo type of graphics, Illustrator type things, any kind of drawings. Any of those elements could be brought into video, and then we can manipulate them. And there is different levels of software. So today we're looking at just in kind of the video side of it. Then there's Blackmagic Resolve has something called Fusion, which has more robust effects capabilities and layers and additional kind of effects compositing work that can be done. And then there's something like Adobe After Effects that can do a lot of animated work and things. But we can achieve a lot of this just in the video editing realm and not have to go much more beyond that. So we want to really look at that. How can we do that? So the idea too is by something like today, when you look at moving photos and adding movement to them, this could be a way that perhaps you create a whole film, is just by taking photos or archival photos or photos you have and just making them move and adding movement and animating them. And that could be a great way to potentially tell your story and in a really neat way, right? So that's a really cool way. So, let's always think about that, like what we can do in the, taking what we have and potentially enhancing it. So not just, having the still image that just sits still, but how can we actually enhance it? So yeah, let's look at some examples. I'm just going to pull up a couple clips here I have. So I'm going to pull up one of these, a documentary. Let's look at this one. So this was for the Craigleith Heritage Depot, the Blue Mountains Museum, and it's something that I edited. So there's a bit of movement in adding some photos. So I'm just going to play a piece of this. Let's have a look.
Here in 1861, I should say, be more precise. 1870s, 1880s, they began to see the temperateness of the climate.
Okay. So, if we just kind of look back here, we can see, some layers. You see there's a map, and then it dissolves over into this photo, and this photo is then zooming in. And I've also put some scratched film damage effects, they're called, to make it look like some sort of old film footage. So these are just still images. So this is the kind of idea of what we want to look at, is how can we add some movement so we can zoom in and make things move a little bit. So that's kind of one idea, one interesting example. So let me just let me pull up another one here. This was one we did for the Aurora Museum. And it's going to pull forward here a little bit to a spot with some nice, interesting photo work. Okay, and here we go. So here's some work with, taking these are still images from the archives and moving them. So you can see like vertically moving up and down, zooming into them. So these are just regular still images and manipulated in the editing software, in this particular DaVinci Resolve software. And see, you can move up and down, and then there's some things like this where there's like blur effects and different movements into it. So it can be quite effective in what can be achieved. And how you can take what's just really just still scans of newspaper articles, posters, all these kind of archival materials, and what can you do with them to make them zoom in, dissolve, layer, right? So just kind of like in Photoshop where you can like montage things, we can do the same kind of thing in editing. So and let's look, I have one more here from another documentary. So let's just give this one a look. So there's just going to be some regular footage here, and then it goes over into some map work. So see this kind of putting maps over video footage. And again, that's just a still map, and having it go over and move vertically, zooming in, moving up and down. And you can see that can be quite effective in helping to tell the story of kind of positioning where this reenactment of the War of 1812 is, and then an actual map of it and having it over it. So what could have just been a boring map just sitting there, it's moved, it's going like vertically up and down, like a kind of a tilt, and we're zooming into it and doing a bunch of different things. So it's pretty cool to be able to do that, right? So yeah, that's kind of where that is. So let's further look at moving on from here. So let's see, the next thing is, let's get right into importing some footage. So I'm just going to take us out of here. It's going to go to the screen here. So what I'm going to do is just open up DaVinci Resolve. So I'm just going to start the software up. So it's the little icon here on the bottom, DaVinci Resolve. I'm going to create a project that just, for demo purposes, and then I'm going to import some footage. And again, you can review the entire Resolve process. There's a bunch of tutorial videos that we've created, step by step, how to create all of this and bring things in. So I'm just going to load this software up. It's going to take a second here. And here we go. So what I'm going to do is create an untitled project. And what I'll do right away is bring some footage in. So I'm just going to create a new bin, have some photos. Okay. And then I'm going to import media, and I have a few photos and graphics I'm going to bring in somewhere here. Where's my photo movement demo? Here we go. So these are a bunch of images. So I'm just going to do a whole open on those. All right, so I just got different images. So I have like some photos, a logo, another photo, different backgrounds, space, and so on, right? So just a few layers of elements that we can work with and just see what is it like to manipulate them. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a new a bin, and I'm going to put like my edits in there just for organizing. And then I'm going to go new timeline, photo movement demo. Okay, so I have a sequence. So what we need to do is always, just like with video, we have our source files, our video clips, our photos in this case, and then we have our cuts. So we're putting everything into a sequence. So we're sequencing things. So even though it's just photo, we still need to create, layers of elements, right? So let's start with something fun. Let's take a background, like a space background, like so. Okay, I'm going to bring that in here. Okay, and then what I'm able to do is if I go up to the inspector window here on the top corner, you can see I start to get into these transform areas, and we have zoom elements. So what I can do is I can zoom in and out of the photo, to like nothingness to really close up. And generally we can preserve pretty good quality because these things are usually a bit better quality than the actual HD video files. All right, and then what we can do is there's this area right over here, and these are all the keyframes. So I'm just kind of pointing to the side of the screen here. But the keyframes are really cool because by turning those on, I can then decide where it starts and it stops. So I can create some zooms. Let's have a look at what that means. So by clicking this on, it goes red. Okay, right here on the side. And when it's red, that means my keyframes are activated. So however, whatever I set this as right now, so I'm just going to set it here at like 1.34, right? That's where it's going to be right now. So that's my start point. And it's going to just stay like that. So we're not really doing anything. But what I'm going to do is go right to the end of the shot, right? So I'm going to go right to the end of the shot here. So I just have that photo piece and it's about 5 seconds, right? And at the end of the shot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that keyframe again, so the red keyframe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a big zoom in, okay? And now when I go back, I now have my start point that I marked by clicking it red, so I activated the keyframe. I've gone to the end point, which is 3.55, so I've kind of 4 times zoomed into it. And now I have this kind of zoom in, which is really cool. So watch this. When I hit spacebar to play, right? So I've now zoomed into my space background. So I've created some movement. So what was totally still and had no movement, it feels like I'm flying in through space now, right? So it's that simple just to get some keyframes going. And it's all in this inspector tool. So in the sequence, we're just, we can turn this on or off, but I just have it on here. Then I'm able to inspect and do things. So then what we can do is we can do rotations. We can move it around a little bit, reposition it, and play with things like that. So watch what happens now if I want to do a little bit of a rotation. So I'm just going to, Command Z that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just zoom in a little bit more here for my start point. Then I'm going to say, okay, well, let's start like that, my rotation angle. So I've engaged, the ability to now, I can take the images and I can like spin them, like rotation, right? So it can be, think of like, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, right? And so on, moving all around. And by being able to rotate, I can now have a start point of this and I can go to the end. Okay, I'm going to click on that keyframe on rotation again. And I'm going to do a little bit of a rotation of, let's say, 33 degrees. Right, so now I'm not only zooming in, I'm giving it a little bit of a rotation. So check this out. Okay, so we've now created a regular still image and we're able to have this zoom in plus a rotation. Right, so that's pretty cool. And then if I click down here, I can actually see the zoom and the keyframes where they are. So this kind of lets me see the magic of what's happening, my rotation and you can see the rotation angles there, the zoom there. So it starts to give you graphs of like what's happening. So if you want to get into a little bit more advanced of what's happening there, we can kind of double check what's happening. So now the cool thing is I can actually start layering some elements as well. So I have video 1. So what I'm going to do is add a track. So all I'm doing to add a track, I'm just doing a right click. So I'm just taking my mouse, right click on the timeline. So, by clicking right, I'm getting to the add a track right here. So I'm going to add a track and I've created video 2. And what's cool is, so now I got like video 1, video 2, and I can layer all these things, right? So think of it as just, and these can have different opacities. So I can start to do that layering work that I showed you guys in that demo of having, different images on top of each other and they're rotating and working with each other. So that could be really cool to add. Okay, so let's add, I think we had this planet, right? So I'm going to just take this, I'm going to drop this down here, right? So look, now I have a planet on top of my space background, like so, right? But the planet's pretty big. So let's do the same thing. I'm going to go click on that. So now what I want to do here is I'm clicking on whichever one I want to engage in the inspector, right? So if I click back to the background, my first space background, you can see the keyframes are working there. This one's all fresh, so everything's at like 1 or 0, right? So what I'm going to do is start with the planet being pretty small and distant, right? So that's my start point. I'm going to go to the end here, and I'm going to say, okay, well, let's bring this planet in and make it really big. Okay, so here we go. Now we got that spinning space rotation. We got this planet's going to zoom in a bit too. Right, and we've done this in like just a few seconds, just some minimal work in the inspector, understanding like our keyframes. We click them on, so that's all we need to do is just click on these keyframes to turn them on or off, and we're able to do these kinds of really cool zooms. Right? So same thing applies now. I can do the similar idea. I can do a bit of I can position this too. So not only, it doesn't have to just be centered, right? So why don't we like move this planet, you know, have it kind of coming from maybe like over here, like the bottom right, right? So you can see, so I've engaged the keyframe in my position, my X and Y, so X being the horizon and Y being the vertical plane. And let's see by the end, right? I don't want it just there. I want it to kind of come more at us. I'm gonna have it kind of move over a little bit. It doesn't have to be totally centered, but we're gonna do a little bit of movement, so as if it's coming towards us. So I've keyframed it now so that I'm adjusting the position as well. See, that's already pretty cool, right? So this is a 5-second image. So this is the same idea. So these are elements, space elements, this stock elements that I've purchased, and I can do this kind of quick manipulation to it. Okay, so now let's take a photo. Let's take just like this archival photo I have. I'm just going to put this right after here. Okay, so I just got this photo. So you can see, so we got our space, and I'm just going to go to this photo. Again, this photo is just there, right? So it's kind of like, okay, fine. It's not really doing too much. It's still. So let's do the same idea here now. So in terms of our inspector, we're going to hit the zoom. I'm going to hit the keyframe. So red, it turns it on. Okay, and why don't we zoom in so we fill in the whole screen, like so. Okay, and I'm going to also hit my position. And what I'm going to do is kind of start below. So that's my start point. I'm like, okay, cool. So now what I want to do is kind of move up, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit as well. So I go to the end. I'm going to engage this keyframe. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And then here, I'm going to keyframe and move it up like so. So that's kind of my end position. So all we're looking at is what is my beginning position, what's my end position. So here we go. This is a little bit of a zoom and tilt up, if you will. Right? So that's pretty cool. So we've started from a bottom position, right? So we just have our keyframe. Right? And originally, the photo was just this, right? So compare this, we got this movement, to if I just edited this in. Not very exciting compared to this. And all this is creating a keyframe from the beginning into the end and what I want it to do in between. And then the software figures out what to do everything before. So you may be wondering, okay, what is a keyframe? And I didn't actually explain that to begin with. So the keyframe is really the key moment of a positioning point or effects point. So if I'm saying right now, you can see I'm starting at the bottom of the photo, seeing the soldier's feet. So that's like the keyframe of the point. I'm like down there. And then my next keyframe is the end point where I'm moving up towards the flags and I've zoomed in. So then I'm telling the computer software, hey, Resolve, you decide and figure out how to move me from one to the other. And it does so with like these algorithms of deciding, okay, it's going to slowly zoom in and move up and readjust the existing pixels of the photo to create that kind of animated movement, right? So we don't have to worry about that. We just got to tell it, I want to start from here. I want to end in this other spot. Okay, so now we look at that's fine, okay? And we can also look at, let me just get another photo, for example, just some layers. I'm not necessarily trying to tell any specific story here, but let's look if we put another photo on top. And what we can do here is we can play a little bit with, I'm going to do some keyframe work, and then I'm going to do a little bit of work with opacity. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this, the cookie shot here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And start like so. And then I'm going to go to my endpoint, engage the keyframe, zoom in a lot. And there we go. So now we got this image is zooming in. Okay, now this photo is a little bit larger, so it's kind of chugging along a little bit, but it's sufficient for us to see what's happening. Okay, so now we've covered the other photo, right? So we no longer see what's underneath. So now you might say, okay, well, what else can we do? So I can keyframe the opacity. You can see that there's a keyframing ability right there too. So if I can keyframe the opacity, I can then kind of, dissolve into this slowly and start with the other one, right? Or come into this later. So what I'm going to do is actually just move it over a little bit because I don't need it right on top of each other the whole time. But I'm going to kind of create a little bit of a long dissolve between the two. Okay, so I'm going to just go here. And here I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to completely not see you. And I'm going to go over here. And now what I'm trying to look at is where does the other photo end? So I'm going to kind of go to full opacity of the cookies by that point. And let's give it a playback. Let's see what that looks like. Beautiful. Right? So I don't have to just worry with, having specific dissolves or anything. I can actually play with opacity and keyframe it. So I can decide that, images can be on top of each other for a really long time. So let's try and do the same thing when we're going to do a really long image now. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of extend the photo out, and it doesn't have to stay 5 seconds. I think that's just the base length. Okay, and we're going to get our cookie image. I'm going to put that on top. Excuse me. And the great thing is, so I'm going to just stretch this out, make it really long. So we're going to do kind of a similar idea. So I'm just going to turn the top layer off. I'm going to go to the inspector. I'm going to click on my zoom. I'm going to start the photo kind of zoomed in so I get the full screen of it. My position, I'm going to, just kind of like what we did before. And I'm going to go to my endpoint and say, okay, I want to be more zoomed in. And I want to be right up on the top of the flags. Okay, so now I got this really long, slow move. You can see how gradually slow it is. So remember, length, right? The length of the shots can make our things more dramatic by, extending this, making it a slow move, right? So remember those keyframes, if it's 5 seconds, it has to do from point A to point B in 5 seconds. If it's 20 seconds, it does point A to point B in 20 seconds, right? So that can help with telling the story differently. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at the cookies. And I'm going to do a little bit of zoom work on them too. Okay, and that's fine. Let's do kind of a zoom in. And now I'm going to do this opacity. So I'm going to stretch that out. So I'm going to start here at 0. Okay, and let's say around here, I'm going to just go to like 50. So I can create these kind of blended imagery concepts. Keep it at about 50. And then by here, I'm going to have total cookie. Okay, so let's have a look at now the 2. And this is with the blended opacity. So I'm going to have these kind of superimposition ideas. Now see how that looks? It's really neat. So we're getting the soldiers, we're getting like the cookies. So, in this case, maybe we're telling a bit of the story of in the past, that was a big thing of having like cookies as your rations for food, right? So we're perhaps telling that kind of a story. And, we see we've moved over to the cookie. So we have the zoom movement, we have the cookie, and we've also been able to create this long superimposition of the two layers, right? So the background photo and the top photo. So just remember our layers and working with those and putting things on top of one another. And it can really help visually to just set ourselves up so we know, okay, here's one layer, here's another layer, right? And moving that way to make it all work, right? So that's a really cool concept there as well. Okay, so that's that idea. So now let's look at if we wanted to, I brought in a logo here. So here's like my, one of the company logos here. So I'm just gonna put this logo in, and that could be something we want to manipulate as well. So these kind of PNG files, you can see it's like right on top there, right? So, where do we want that, right? So this could be, a quick way to deal with a logo, for example. You might want to like watermark your video pieces. I can quickly, lower the opacity of that and, make it smaller and say, okay, I want it to be on the bottom left corner like that. And that's how we can add a watermark, right, into like this kind of idea too. So there's like the little logo, right? And then we have like our cookie dissolve image, right? And working on that, right? So that's how we can quickly add a graphics and move them around. And then maybe, let's say here by the end, right? I want to change that. So that's the beauty of the keyframe. I can then say, okay, well, you know what? From here to here, I want that logo to go totally 100% opacity. And I'm going to say, I want it to also zoom up or zoom in. Okay, and then figure out my, oops, I don't want to do that yet. Just Command Z that. Okay, so that's great. And what I'll do is I'm going to keyframe that. So click on the position point, and then by the end, I'm going to say, okay, I want it to be up here and kind of in the middle. So this is how we can start to manipulate our graphic. So, just sitting there kind of in the corner, watermark. And we've seen this where, you kind of get a logo that comes up in like a commercial or something. And see, it kind of comes up all the way and it fills the screen, right? So we can do the same thing to graphics. So whether we create graphics and like Photoshop type programs, and we can add those and manipulate them and move them in. Okay, so let's not worry about the graphic. That's just wanted to show that we can do that kind of watermark work. So now what we can do too is, so if this photo looks like this, perhaps we can go to the color grading and I can say, okay, you know what? I want this photo to be black and white. So I can desaturate it. I can, add more contrast. So this is just kind of like doing post-processing in any kind of Photoshop type program. I can leave a little bit of saturation, for example, and maybe I make it, it's kind of reddish. We can kind of play with that idea. Make it kind of a sepia, right? So that can be kind of fun to do something like that. We'll do like more high contrast. And then I can do something with the cookies. I'm just going to get to the cookies themselves. Same idea. I can make them, different colors. Make them very blue. And maybe they're like super saturated. All right, so here's kind of what we did now. We've made a black and white type look, or sepia type look, I should say, a little bit of contrast. And then the cookies, we've left more color, and I've kind of taken some warmth out, so they're a little bit bluer. So we can do all that kind of post-processing work on it too. So then the other thing we can do is on this bottom footage itself, I showed you guys a bit earlier, there's, you know, what happens if we want to have stuff like, you know, film grain and things like that. So we can actually go into our open effects. We have our effects library. If you don't see it, you just have to click on effects library and I'll take you to it. And then we can go to, there's a bunch of cool effects that are just in the bottom here. Film damage. It's going to drag and drop that right on there. I'm going to get this whole film damage idea. So here, instead of on the inspector, instead of video, I'm going to go to open effects. And, you know, I can tell it to, you know, add all sorts of stuff to it. So we can give it a whirl back now. So you can see it's doing all that kind of old film scratch look, right? And it's not playing back perfectly because again, it's just a little bit of processing work for it to work on now. But again, once you know, enough that we can see what it looks like. So that's how we can totally, I'm just going to turn the cookie off so we can just see the photo on itself. So we've done a zoom, we've added this film damage, and you see how quickly it starts to look like old film footage. And this was totally just a still photo that we've managed to manipulate this way. Right, so how do we do that? So again, let's just go over that one more time. So I go under effects library, right? So all the effects stuff you're going to find on this side. There's effects library on the right side. There's the inspector where we can do all the keyframing, and then the effects library is on the left side. So I'm going to hit effects library. I'm going to go and find open effects, and under open effects I can then find these different types of effects. So open effects, and I'm going to go to film damage under resolve effects texture. There's also film grain if we just want to add like some grain, right? And so on. So film damage, I drag it on over to it, and it kind of gives us the defaults of it. Then you can, you know, decide what we're doing to it. Oh, and I think what's happened is it's actually given us two of them. I'm just going to trash that one. Okay, so and then here we can just manipulate, you know, like what we want. So there's temperature shifts. We can, you know, have it all blurred. You know, it can be like a tilt amount of the vignetting. Dirt size, you know, how dirty we want it, scratches and so on, flickering speed. Right, so really, really cool effect. So that was a total still image. So remember that we just had this, and we've keyframed it to have movement, and we've added the film damage effect to bring it to life in this manner. It's again all done here with the effect. We can also keyframe the effect element. So that's the beauty of it. Every single thing here is keyframeable. So, you know, I really want to urge everyone to start with a photo, get into some of the main keyframing, which is usually just a resizing, you know, so going from like a zoom factor of like 1 to 3, for example. Get used to that, like going from point A to point B. What does that mean? Maybe then adding some movement, rotation, and things like that. So we can start again with, you know, the really cool exercise was this first part here, just, you know, how do we get into some planets, moving it in, you know, going from there. And then we started doing some movement here, a little bit of dissolve to the cookies really fast. And that's led us all the way here where we have our whole, you know, film type look, and we're keyframing on there. So what's really, really important I want to stress is that to have that starting keyframe and an end keyframe. And if you just go through your shot and say, this is how I want it to start, and you know, this from point A to point B, that's how we got to start thinking about what we want to manipulate that image into from point A to point B, and work that way. And if you have a good idea of what that is. If something doesn't work out it's really simple to basically, we just say, okay, here's this, and there's a whole reset here. So I'm just gonna, I can just hit this and it just resets it. And, no problem, you can start again, right? And you can also Command Z, right? And you can reset each element. So I can say, okay, I'm gonna reset the positioning. I don't want that positioning at all. So it gives us a reset of everything in the transform, a reset of each control element. And I think that can be really important because sometimes you might make one mistake. You don't necessarily need to start from scratch all over, but you want to just reset certain elements. So that inspector tool, and then the resets and the keyframes there. So I hope that really helps to explain, what kind of the layering is and the functions of the elements here and what we can do. And then also, being able to add a graphic, like a watermark, like a logo, and then having it, zoom in. You can treat it the same as all the cookies and everything too, right? So you can see how we kind of end up in this this image at the end, like so, which is pretty useful to just have kind of an end logo point. So again, so from just elements, a planet, a background, doesn't do anything, kind of boring. Great, there's a planet, doesn't tell anything. All of a sudden I have a planet that's coming at us through space, flying. So still images all of a sudden have this animated feel to them, and it's quite extraordinary what can happen that way. And it's all just through these the keyframes here. So zoom again is going from the start point zoom, right, point A to point B, right? So we're doing an X, Y, and there it's locked so that it's it's relative to one another. So we're not like zooming one side, because you could do stretches if you don't keep them locked together. And then we have our positioning, so we can have things move up or down. We can have a rotation of planets and things, and then we can get into even more complicated things. But want to really stress getting into first the keyframing of a zoom, pan, rotation. Try those out. See how those go with any kind of photo. Try adding some film damage or film grain in those open effects, and then we can do that color grading and change the color and the look and post-process the photos and to look, they can look different. They can have more color, less color, and fix things. I had some archival photos that were, kind of wrong. The processing was a bit off in the print, so it made daytime look very blue. Potentially wrong film stocks or settings and things like that. So you can fix that and all of a sudden bring other, more color into it, make it look like it was potentially supposed to look. So that's a lot of fun part too in this photo work, is that you can make things look even better than they were intended. Okay, so let's open it up to some questions. If anybody has any questions, we can start to look at some of these. So let's have a look here. Okay, so I got one question here. So the first question, if I have a question, if you arranged fade-in effects overlays and discover that the sequence needs to be longer or shorter to match audio, is there a way to lengthen or shorten the composite sequence? Definitely. So if we open up the file here, let me just go to this cookie shot here. So we can stretch it longer. And kind of moves over, right? And we can keep our keyframes. There is something called fit to fill, and I don't want to get too much way ahead of ourselves yet. But just to make, if you do need just a little bit of room, here's like where the cookies kind of come in and out. We can then change the zoom factor. So here the zoom would kind of stop zooming. So let's just have a look at that. I'm going to turn this logo off. So how can we do some quick fixes? That's a great question. So I've just extended this, and then see how the zoom kind of ends. So what I can do quickly is just drag it out to the end point, right? And that way, if it's just, I've added about 12 to 16 frames here, and that preserves that zoom factor all the way there by adding a little bit of extra frames. Right, so that's one way to do it, and there are some kind of additional tricks that I could offer as well. So one thing too is what you could do is if you had a previously edited area, if I take, let's just for example take this, I'm going to take the cookie image. Oh, there's another cookie image. Okay, this cookie image, and just put it here. So this is just the plain image, right? And let's just make it a kind of a random length. I don't know what it is, right? So what we can do here is I can click on this. I can do a Command C. So just on the keyboard, I'll do Command C to copy. So Command C. And now you might ask, okay, so what am I copying? I'm copying the whole shot, but I can actually also be copying just the parameters. So now if I right click, I can say paste attributes. And I'm going to say paste the video attributes, and you can decide which ones they are, but I'm just going to do all of them. Okay, and what it's done is it's taken what is happening in that really long shot and it makes it happen in the shorter duration. Right? So my opacity is kind of ruined in there, but it's the same idea. So I'm taking what was done here with the cookies, right? And I've done the same kind of attribute here of pasting it over, right? So you can quickly paste things over and make them fit that way too. So that could be a really great tool. Okay, so here's another question. How far from the original photo must the new manipulated photo be considered to be different enough to be considered an original photo? Okay, so yeah, that's a great question. So when we get into photo manipulation or editing, the key is that we still need to have the rights to the photos. So if you're, it's a complex subject, but ultimately you still need to have rights to the photos. So whether it's stock photos, archival photos, or anything. So anything that I've just been showing are images that I'm using for educational purposes and are photos that I have access to or have been granted rights to. So that's really important still, to just take someone's photo and do things to it. It wouldn't constitute that it's copyright free because of that. So I would always recommend using stock photo libraries to work within that. And there isn't really a way to totally manipulate something and say, okay, well now it's different, right? So for artistic purposes, if you're making a statement, there are fair use ideas that you have to be able to use images to make a statement. So for example, political, satirical, all these kinds of statement pieces, or to tell a thesis point of a film or a documentary. You may have to be able to use elements, otherwise you wouldn't be able to tell that story. But if I just wanted to have photos of famous celebrities and just do a bunch of zooms and things on the photos, that wouldn't really constitute enough of a use. But if you have someone that does celebrity photography, that can work to get the rights from that person, right? So you definitely still need to clear your photos and for rights and everything. Okay. Okay, question, just unrelated, but it's not a bad question. So process for storyboarding, do you use pen and paper, get into like software? So this is the same idea. Even when we're doing this, the process of photo animation manipulation in video editing, same idea that you want to figure out what layers, what photos you want to do. So I would definitely chart them out. I usually use just digitally using Google Drive, even just like docs, and like charting out what order the photos will be in, what layers of photos I want to use, and have an idea. Also, you can organize things in your editing bins, right? So I made a bin that's called photos. It could be like more bins. It could be like 1960s archival, 1970s archival, and then really specific, like marching archival, drumming archival, whatever, if there's parade related things, different cookies, so gingerbread cookies, chocolate chip cookies, right? So having that. So in terms of storyboarding, yeah, and then for on the kind of production side, that kind of process of what happens when could very well be done on paper. A lot of people, I personally still do a lot of just sketching of what shots I might want to do for storyboarding, and that's even for editing. I'll do sketches of what orders I want to do, or just notes. So there's a lot of paper notes, there's digital, so it's kind of a blend. So that's and there are some tools. There is some software called I think there's Storyboarder. I think it's Toon Boom, the Montreal company, that can do that, and there's a bunch of apps too. So we're actually hoping to have a storyboard workshop again in the near future, and we have some videos that we're going to post about that soon too. So it will be a topic covered shortly. So that's great question. Okay, so I think that's it, and really happy and glad that you guys could join us this evening. You can definitely rewatch this. We'll post this in a condensed version of how to get the keyframes going and photos going for DaVinci Resolve. Again, totally free, so download it. You can just take some photos even from your phone and just manipulate them, work with them. And it's really fun. You can take photos and make them look like they're Super 8 footage from the 70s or 60s. So it's a really fun tool to work on. Please check out events.tbmcs.ca for more of the upcoming workshops, webinars. Like I said, equipment access, computer access, it's there in the Blue Mountains Public Library. More coming soon to Wasaga Beach and Collingwood Public Library in the spring. We're going to have computers there as well, so stay tuned for that. Really exciting. So never feel that you might not have the full access. There's going to be more equipment out there in our South Georgian Bay area. So really happy to be able to do this. Once again, let me just get back over to the last screen here, and want to definitely thank all of our partners in this program. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, and the Wasaga Beach Public Library. Really key in making this happen. Thanks for joining us. My name is Tom Strnad, lead digital artist of the Blue Mountains Creator Space, or the Creator Space Mobile Digital Arts Lab, as it is now. And thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of the evening. Take care.